Hello, everyone. Welcome so much for being here. Tonight, we are in conversation with Bill Konigsberg, author of 6 novels, such as the Penn Center USA Literary Award winning The Porcupine of Truth and the Sid Fleischman Award winning Openly Straight. Of course, we're here to celebrate his latest book, Destination Unknown, set in the late 80s, where 2 young gentlemen have to, unfortunately, go through the AIDS epidemic. Let's go ahead and give him a nice round of applause. Thanks for being here, Bill.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. I've been told I must use this microphone because we're also being simulcast around the world. Okay, so anyway, thank you for showing up, and thanks to Mysterious Galaxy for hosting me. This book is an interesting one to talk about. Probably, I guess what I would say about Destination Unknown is it's the one that I've always known I would write. I am somebody who has never written a memoir, but I write very much autobiographically. I would say the easiest way to put it is that I tend to translate my own life into novels, into fiction, and to this point, into young adult novels. I think probably the 3 books that needed to be written that I was going to write in my life were Out of the Pocket, my first novel, which was about coming out, which was a big part of my life, coming out as gay. And in this case, coming out while in the spotlight, because I came out while working at ESPN. And it sort of translated into a novel about a gay high school football player. The Bridge, my last novel, which was about depression and suicide. This was something that I've dealt with in my life, chronic depression, and also a suicide attempt. And that was a very tough one to write. And then because I'd just written a book that was really challenging to write and really dark, I thought I'd go a little lighter. So I wrote about AIDS. I'm kidding. I did, though, feel like, that's something that was so central to my life, the fact that I came of age in the 1980s in New York City. So there are 2 things going on there. 1980s, New York City. And I say that because they sort of warred against each other in my life. On the one hand, New York City, we all know, is not only the epicenter of the AIDS epidemic, but it's also sort of the center of gay LGBT culture in a lot of ways. So I, in some ways, was very fortunate to grow up among that. But it was the 1980s, and it was a very different time to grow up. Obviously, for those of you who are a bit younger, there was no social media, there was no internet. I have told this story before, so if you've heard it, I'm sorry, but one story I like to tell is about when I was coming out and I was about 15. I knew I was gay and I could find no information, so I went to the school library and I was so nervous. They had, at that time, card catalogs, 8 million years ago. And I looked up, I very carefully looked up homosexuality, but I had horticulture in mind in case somebody came up behind me. I could switch it. And there was nothing. There were a couple periodicals that were about this new disease, and there was an encyclopedia. And the encyclopedia, unfortunately, hadn't been updated since 1972. So that day I learned that I was mentally ill because, of course, the DMSR, is that right, DMSR? Changed in 1973. And psychologists decided being homosexual was not a mental illness. So that was a tough day. But all is to say, it was a challenge. And moreover than that, all over New York City, you could see things happening. I lived on the Upper West Side, but if I went to the Village, men were dying. You could see it. And nobody was talking about it. So nobody was talking about it in the media. Anybody who was alive at this time probably remembers this, but the media almost never touched on this. Newspapers rarely did. There were no gay characters on television. There were rarely gay characters on television. And usually when there were, they were jokes. So there's no place for this. So it was a little bit I think at one point, one of the characters in the book says, I feel like I'm going crazy. And that's how I felt most of the time growing up, because this thing was happening that was impacting me in one way, and I was going to school and nobody was talking about it. Anyhow, I'm going to read you a section in a bit, but I just want to bring up one sort of a little bit of background for you about what this novel is. You know, the novel is about two characters, CJ and Micah. Neither CJ nor Micah is me, but I think if you put them together, they're sort of close to me. I would say that CJ, who's sort of a wild child, is sort of monster Bill. I was an interesting kid who made some interesting choices in his life. And Micah and his sort of nerdy self and how he dressed was also kind of me. So I was a little bit of both. And I needed to create these two characters because I wanted to put them together. And it is in some ways a story of friendship and also possibly a love story. I won't give anything away. But this was my opportunity to explore this time in fiction. I'm going to read from the beginning of the book. Well, I'm going to read, I've timed it out. It's 8 hours and 50 minutes. So if you're all ready, go try to, you're all set. Okay. Now I'm going to read just a little bit from the first two chapters, sort of skip around. It'll be about a 8 to 10 minute read. And then I'll say a few more things and then we'll take some questions. By the way, on my way here, I listened for the first time to the audiobook. It's good. Let's just say the guy's better than me. I'm just going to say. I mean, in some ways. In other ways, I'm better. I mean, in baldness, I'm better. Tallness, I think. I've never met him. Okay. So this is chapter 1 of Destination Unknown. The chapter is called Noticeable One. September 1987. The first thing I noticed about C.J. Gorman was his plexiglass bra. Alone, he skulked in a dark corner of the tunnel. I say skulked because his head bent down and his posture curled in, which I thought was interesting because he was dressed to be seen, obviously. His short hair was dyed platinum blonde with shocking pink highlights in front. His tall, thinner-than-rail frame would have cut an imposing figure without the clincher. He was shirtless, with an open black sequined jacket over a plexiglass bra that was only half covered in tinfoil, allowing for his obvious lack of mammary glands to be seen. Brand New Lover by Dead or Alive blared over the speakers and rumbled the floor. The air was hazy with cigarette and who knows what else smoke. The haze smelled faintly of paint thinner. My friend Dina had dragged me out with a group of school friends on a Friday night when I could just as easily have been comfortable at home, watching the replay of the MTV Music Video Awards hosted by downtown Julie Brown. My friends were all out on the floor dancing, while I stood alone near the bar. Story of my life. I barely made it in. This guy with an eye patch stood out front, pointing at various groups of people from the mob wanting to get into this former railroad terminal turned chic nightclub. I was praying I'd be disallowed so I could go back home, but Dina was hanging on my arm, and Dina is hot. So yeah, I made it. Yay. The lights and movement on the dance floor dizzied my already heavy brain. A girl with Goldilocks braids and a peppermint striped skirt swirled, her dilated pupils at the tops of their sockets. A white guy with dreadlocks, wearing what appeared to be a plastic bag, ground against her. I looked away and found myself drawn against to CJ, his arms folded across his plexiglass bra, surveying the crowd. He looked to me like everything I never would be. He postured like he owned the place and was a little over the whole thing. I was transfixed. I wasn't sure if it was the height, the unapologetic attitude, the thinness, or all of the above. Maybe I gawked. Maybe I stopped myself. I had to be careful who saw me taking this boy in. Sorry, I'm going to move ahead a little bit. He talks to his friend Dina, who comes over. He's really doesn't want to be there, and he winds up sort of going to the bathroom to avoid all of this. The tunnel didn't believe in men's rooms or women's rooms. All the bathrooms were unisex, first come, first serve. When I walked in, club kids filled the space, hogging the mirrors. Company B was busy screeching about how fascinated they were by my love toy. I sincerely doubted they would be. My head pounded. I didn't have to pee that badly, and I wished there were a black hole I could climb into, perhaps hidden in one of the stalls, or some sort of fast-forward button I could press to jump past senior and junior year and be at a college somewhere calm. Earlham in Indiana was calling me. Maybe I'd become a Quaker. Hey, fatty, you actually going to use that stall, or are you just going to stand there? This bald kid with a glittered forehead and paint-on eyebrows asked that. Sorry. I covered my belly with my hands and moved toward the sinks, inadvertently bumping into someone, which made me say, sorry, again. The person into whom I bumped had a blonde pompadour and wore too much blush on his powder-white face. Excuse you, he said, pushing me lightly with the backs of his fingers. Then he looked me up and down with his hands on his hips. Pure bridge and tunnel. Go back to Long Island, honey. Leave us one place that's just ours. I froze. Long Island? I was Upper West Side, born and bred. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but no words came out. Great comeback, he said, sneering. Kindness. Give it a try, a low, booming voice said behind me. It was CJ, standing in the doorway. His voice was very Top Gun, even if the bra and hair pointed in a different direction. Oh my God, it's Dale Bozio, Pompadour guy said, all nasal and deadpan. If she had AIDS. I felt like I'd been dropped into the middle of a parallel universe. Dale Bozio put his hands on his hips, which only emphasized his bare midriff. Be gone before someone drops a house on you, he said, expressionless. The bald guy laughed. So did the guy with the pompadour. He leaned in, and he and Dale Bozio did this air kiss thing, one on each side, like they hadn't just been insulting each other. Baldy and Pompadour went over to the mirror, leaving me and Dale in front of an empty stall. I must have been staring because Dale sized me up. Why are you dressed like this? Who hurt you? Totally unsmiling delivery. I looked down. I was wearing an aqua blue Lacoste shirt with the collar up, a pair of ill-fitting Lee jeans, green Keds, and my beige members-only jacket. What? I said. Are you a plant? He said. Are you a narc? Did the Russians send you? Only the Russians dress this way. I shrugged, utterly unprepared for whatever kind of joking this was. He pursed his lips. You're cute, but that jacket, it must be burned. Everyone keeps saying that. He said, everyone is right. I laughed, frustrated and surprisingly disarmed by this person who was obviously way cooler than I would ever be. I glanced around to make sure no one from school had decided that they, too, needed to pee. Thank you, by the way, I said. No sweat. I'm so over mean people right now. I said, well, I'm not mean. He smirked again. I wouldn't imagine you are, or could be. We stared at each other, and it was so weird because I wasn't really into drag or whatever, but he thought I was cute. He was obviously stunning. And even more than that, it was like I just met someone important, like my body knew it, like the universe was whispering to me, pay attention. I'm going to jump to chapter 2 and explain to you what has happened before the scene. What has happened before the scene is that CJ has told Micah that he doesn't have money to get home, that the person he was with has run off. Micah thinks he might be getting scammed because CJ seems dicey, but he's also so enamored and interested by this character that he's decided he doesn't care. So he has decided to help CJ get into a cab. They're walking down 28th Street on the far west side in Manhattan. CJ and I walked on in a semi-comfortable silence, our arms swinging together like we were schoolchildren holding hands. The night stretched thin before us, and I was glad we were alone together. I wondered what he was thinking. I was thinking about maybe trying again with my parents, because maybe they'd be okay with it. I was just scared. My thoughts were interrupted by CJ muttering something I couldn't quite hear, and then I saw these two white guys maybe in their 20s, walking toward us. One wore a Yankees cap and had a sloppy mustache. The other, wearing a white down jacket, looked greasy to me. The thin night thickened. The energy changed around us in an instant. Fags, Yankee Cap called out, loud, menacing. CJ grabbed my hand harder in defiance. Brothers, he said. Fucking fags, you're going to give us all AIDS, Down Jacket said. They were near us now, and CJ stopped walking. I wanted the world to stop. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the safety of my own bed. And what if we are fags? CJ asked calmly. You think you're going to do something about it? The guy cracked up. Yeah, some dude dressed like a slut really scares me. I'll do something about it. I'll kick your freaking ass. And CJ reached into his pocket and pulled out a Swiss Army knife. He pulled out the gleaming blade and showed it to the guys. Your pansy ass wouldn't. CJ picked up his other hand and, emotionless, sliced a small cut on his index finger with the blade. A crimson line emerged from the gash. He looked at the guys. That's exactly it, he said, still calm. We're all here to give you AIDS. Which one of you is first? He moved toward the guys and they jumped back. Down Jacket backed off. Crazy faggot, he muttered. You have no idea, CJ said. Please, test me, please. The guys turned and scampered away, and CJ closed the knife, put it back in his pocket. We started walking back toward 10th Avenue. I was trying not to hyperventilate, telling myself it was okay, we were okay, and that, dangerous or not, CJ's tactic had worked. No way were those guys coming at us again. I don't have AIDS, don't worry, CJ assured me. I was just playing off their fear. I may have nodded, or my head may have been frozen. Look, you learn to take care of yourself, CJ said, after putting his bloody finger in his mouth and sucking it. You learn to take care of yourself when no one else does. My thoughts ran in so many directions, and the nausea I felt from nearly getting gay bashed threatened to empty my stomach. CJ stopped and turned toward me, wiping his wet but not his bloody finger on his pants. Sorry you had to see that. You're new. You don't know yet what it can be like. I looked away. I wanted to say, I'm not like you. I don't wear women's clothing on the street. But I also knew that was bullshit. The guys stopped two fags, not one fag and one random innocent person. If he was one, so was I. CJ said, I promise that most of it is really fun. It's just the assholes who aren't. That and AIDS. AIDS is really not fun. Understatement of the century, I said. I knew about AIDS from the news and everything, but I felt its presence the most when I was working at the Lortel Theater on Christopher Street. Walter, the concessions guy, had it. My boss, Felicia, talked about it all the time. But even with that, the disease wasn't real to me. Not yet. I'm going to stop there. So that is a little bit of Destination Unknown. I wanted you to get a sense of some of the tone and these two characters who are, in fact, very different. And then talk just a little bit about some things about this book that I think are perhaps interesting or may interest you. And then we're going to take questions. This is a work of historical fiction. I had never written a book of historical fiction before. I'd never thought of myself as being able to do such a thing. But it turns out that I'm very old, and my teenage years now are historical. So I thought that was kind of funny, but it made me think a little bit about the fact that we're all living in history, and especially for my younger readers, it's something to think about. The fact that perspectives will change, and what's happening now, we might not understand the full meaning of it yet. So if you are somebody who likes to write, I always suggest, as I did, write about what's going on. Someday you'll have been witness to something. And, that's the case here. I had no idea when I was coming of age at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic. I didn't know it was the beginning. I thought it was near the end. I remember thinking, oh God, I can't wait for this thing to be over. The AIDS epidemic, officially began in 1981. I came of age 85, 86, 87. It was not the end. So that, I think, is kind of interesting. The other thing about the historical aspect of this book is there are some people who show up in this book, and every person who shows up in this book who is famous, who has a cameo, was part of my life in the way that they show up in the book. So one character is Marsha P Johnson, who is now, I think it's funny because much better known now. Marsha was an incredible trans woman who was part of history, was at Stonewall and was a figure in the village where I came of age. And she was just this incredible woman who walked down the street, and when she'd see me or anybody like me, she'd say, "Hey, baby, I love you, be safe." And I'd always say, "Thank you, love you too, Marsha." And of course, she passed away in I think she was murdered in the early 90s on the piers in New York City, and a huge loss. Larry Kramer shows up in this book. He is a huge figure in gay history now. He was the founder of ACT UP, and he was a loudmouth. And he shows up in the book in the exact same way that he showed up in my life, which is that I called him. I met him because I was in a play of his at my college, and he came and saw it. And when he saw it, he said, "You're a cute kid. Go find a boyfriend." And so when I came back to the city from that school, I called him and told him that I wanted to get involved, and he told me about ACT UP, and he said, "Come to a meeting." So that's exactly how Larry played a role in my life. In fact, there is ACT UP shows up in the book in the same way that it showed up in my life, which is that I was part of it. God's Love We Deliver is an organization I think may still be around, but they were a wonderful organization that brought meals to people with AIDS who could not get out and could not help themselves. I did that. I delivered meals for God's Love We Deliver as a senior in high school. So that was the way I grew up. I would say, being real about this, that I didn't expect to have a long life expectancy. This was the 80s. I was an extraordinarily precocious kid. So one of the things about me, people say you came out early, and oftentimes when people come out early, it's because they're flamboyant. I wasn't particularly flamboyant. My problem is I have no filter. And I never did. And my mother made the mistake of telling me when I was very young that my feelings and thoughts mattered to the world. And in some ways, she did me a great service because here I am. And in some ways, she did me a disservice because the world doesn't really care about our feelings. But I couldn't lie. I just told people because it was true and I was going through it. That's kind of the story of my life. That has never gone away. So where was I with this? Coming out early. Am I high? What's happening? No, I can't remember where I was going with that, but coming out early. Yeah. So I came out at a time when I thought there was a deadly disease and people were dying and there was no cure. And we knew mostly how that disease was being transmitted, but not fully. If you go back to 1987, and I did some research, even though I was there, I actually went to the Stonewall National Museum and Archives and did just a ton of research and read all of the old New York natives that I'd read as a kid. Everyone knew that anal sex, unprotected anal sex was very dangerous for transmitting this disease, it was a bloodborne illness, and it was in blood and semen. People were unclear about whether this could be transmitted by oral sex. And it's sort of a funny thing if you think about it. Unclear, what does that mean when you're talking about a fatal, perhaps 100% fatal disease? That's a big unclear. So I was petrified my whole life about sex. There was never a time before me being petrified about sex. And as I said, I didn't seem to have the ability to not explore the world. So me being here, I mean, I think some of it was that I was scared, and some of it is luck, and I'm glad I'm here. So many people aren't. Anyway, I think this is probably a good time to stop yammering away and allow you to kind of steer the conversation. I'd really be happy to. Am I doing that? Am I doing anything wrong?
No, it just might be some weird interference with the system. It's okay. Not
Okay.
you.
All right. It's not me. It's not me. It's you, people. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And, don't, I always say this. I am not a scary person. I am the dorkiest person in the world. You're not going to embarrass yourself. Ask me anything. I'd be happy to hear it. Yes, sir. In the back.
Hey, the music has a huge part of this book. Can you explain how it does?
So, in fact, that's right. There is a lot of music in this book. And some of that is because I was hugely influenced in my life by music. I was a huge music fan, and I think some of it was my rescue. It's where I went. Where I disappeared to was the music. And there was all of this queer music that wasn't called queer at the time. So, I remember George Michael and Elton John doing a song together in 1987 called Wrap Her Up, where they were singing about women. And the funny thing about it, it was sort of funny if you knew, but like they neither were out. Nobody was out. Couldn't be out. So I wanted to put music in I am very much somebody who has music always brings me back and takes me into emotion. So all of the chapter titles are song titles. And they are all, at least time-wise, they're all accurate. Nothing is before its time. I made sure there are no mistakes in this book. So if it says October 87, that song was around. And often some of them came out the month that I'm talking about. One other thing about this book, and I think this is sort of funny, it's called Destination Unknown, which is a song by a group called Missing Persons. Missing Persons was my everything growing up. I loved this woman, Dale Bozio, who was mentioned in that scene. She was a former Playboy bunny, a daughter of a mafia person. She was wild and crazy. She had blonde hair with pink in it. She wore the plexiglass bra. And I thought she was the coolest person ever. And I was fixated, and people made fun of me so much. And the thing I like about this is that there's another book out called Like a Love Story, by Abdi Nazemian, who's a great friend of mine. Like a Love Story, of course, comes from a Madonna song, 1989, Like a Prayer. I love the fact that he went with Madonna and I went with Dale Bozio. That says everything you need to know about me. I make every decision that is not popular. But it's also just who I am, and I sort of like that. I like to just be myself. So that's sort of how music plays in for me. The other thing I'll mention is there's a song that is my wedding song that's at the end of this book called Love Don't Need a Reason that you probably don't know, but you may want to look up. It's by a wonderful man named Michael Callan, who died in 1991. He was one of the very first people with AIDS to be public. He was an extraordinarily talented man, and I actually contacted his husband to get the rights to that song, and the lyrics are in the book. And I wanted them to be there. It's there to honor Michael Callan. Okay, what else? What other questions? Yes.
Kind of a weird question. Having lived through the time where a lot of that was being kept from us in the 80s, and Reagan was playing like it didn't exist. For a lot of heterosexual males, it kind of came to the forefront with Magic Johnson. And since you're, former ESPN, I'm just wondering what your feelings about that were. Did that change your world in any way, or did you kind of like, oh, sure, now everybody's looking at it?
I think there was there's so much anger wrapped up in this issue, and if you read the book, you'll see the anger. It's not hidden. I want to say, remind me, anger. After I finish this, I want to say something about that. I would say at that point it was just incredulousness, because it took. Even Rock Hudson dying in 1985 sort of did something, but mostly for the people I was around, just made jokes. Magic Johnson wasn't a joke, and I think that's the truth. And it pissed me off, And by that time, I'm in ACT UP, and I have an avenue for my rage. the thing I wanted to say about anger is I've actually, one of the things I love about this book, I'm, as I said, listening to it now, is that there is so much emotion in this book, and I think it works. The funny thing about this book is that it's a funny book. And I can't, I mean, it's sort of weird to say that your book is funny. It is, it's funny. I wanted to write a book about this heavy topic that was funny. It's also very sad, and it's also very anger-making. And I am the writer who loves to put those things together. Every book of mine has that going for it. And there's a quote in here from Steel Magnolias, which I was an usher for. Micah in the book is an usher for that at the Lortel Theater on Christopher Street in the 80s. And one of the characters says, laughter through tears is my favorite emotion. That has been one of my quotes for 40 years now, because it's 35 years. It's exactly how I feel. I want, when I am reading something, I want to be feeling heavy and have an unexpected laugh, or I want to be feeling light and have something punch me in the stomach. It's just who I am as a reader, and so it's who I am as a writer. Well, yes.
So first off, was this book, you said you had planned of writing this book eventually. Was this something that you had already planned to do and then the pandemic happened, or during the pandemic you're like, you know what, I'm going to finally write this?
I think that I was dreading writing it for a long time because I knew it was going to be hard, and it was hard. But I also don't think I knew how to write it. One thing about this book that I haven't said, there's a Gatsby-esque element to this book. And as I said, I knew there was a story that I would write, and I didn't know what that story was. What I decided to do with this book was to tell the main character and the protagonist the narrator and the protagonist are not the same person. So the story is told by Micah, and it's told about CJ, and I hadn't done that before. I wanted this sort of meeker, more introspective character to write about this sort of bigger than life character. So that was my entry point. As soon as I figured that out, I thought, okay, so that's my gimmick isn't the right word. It's just my entry point. I knew that I could not write a book from my precocious CJ's point of view. I just wasn't equipped to do it for some reason. So this was how I did it. Yeah, what else? Other things? Yeah.
To go back to music, because I like music.
Yeah.
There was a scene where when Micah goes to visit CJ, and CJ hands him a bunch of records.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that that Mike is like, this is my life. I like you. He's responding, whole body experience relating to listening to missing persons.
Yeah.
Was that how it was for you?
I think only in hindsight. I think that I wasn't smart or self-knowledgeable enough to know what it was to me. I just knew I liked it as a kid, but I knew writing it that it was everything. One of the scenes that I think you're referring to two different scenes, but one of them is that he listens to the Missing Persons album, Spring Session M. I was 11 when that album came out. I didn't have a big body reaction to it. I just knew I liked it. But he has a big reaction to it. Micah listens to it and it changes him. And that was a fun one to write because I basically, just like Micah, sat on my bed and played the album and just sort of went to see where it took me. So it was a lot of fun. Writing is fun. Hard, but fun. Hard, but fun. What else is there? Yes?
So was it your idea to publish this under YA? And if so, how hard was it did you have to do any kind of arguing to keep it in YA just because there's so many hard-hitting themes in it?
Not only are there hard-hitting themes, but this is certainly the most explicitly sexual book that I've written. And it comes, of course, on the heels of all of the stuff that's going on with banned books. And I've been making a stand about banned books. I'm in for this one. I'm here to fight. I'm furious about it. Nothing has made me quite as furious as the book banning situation that's going on. And a lot of books are being banned simply because they have a gay or lesbian or bi or trans character. And no, not in my lifetime. That's not going to happen. So I've been making that argument. And here I've written a book that actually, it shouldn't be banned. Absolutely not. And I'll tell you why. But at least I can understand why it will be questioned, because there's a whole lot of stuff going on in this book. I wrote it wondering what Scholastic would do with it. I fully admit to you two things. One, I didn't know if it was YA, and it's a transitional book. I think that I'm going through what you'd call maybe literary puberty. I don't know that I have another YA book in me. I am 51 years old. When I started writing these books, I was 32. And it's so much harder, especially to go modern day with youth. I just didn't grow up in 2022. So that I think it might be over, or I'm going to have to find ways to write where I'm not writing about stuff I don't know, because I won't write about stuff I don't know. I want to just say something else about the banning and what I mean by that. One thing that I hope that we will all talk about when we deal with these arguments about book banning is, well, first of all, nothing should, the only thing I think that is acceptable to ban from school libraries is pornography. I think that is absolutely appropriate. There shouldn't be pornography in school libraries. What we need to think about, though, is discernment. Writing about sex is not pornography. Pornography is there to titillate. It is prurient by nature. This book, by the way, I'm going to say I'm a little annoyed that someone at Scholastic wrote in their copy that this book is sexy, because I don't think this book is sexy. That is not the way I think of this book at all. I lived it. Wasn't sexy. It was a lot of things, not that. So that sort of irks me a little, but sex in this book has a purpose. There's something going on that I'm trying to explore and describe about growing up too fast in New York City, which is exactly what happened to me. And I hope that we can have this conversation about the difference between writing about sex and pornography, because it's so important. Kids should be reading books that have sexual content, because kids can learn stuff. I learned so much reading those books. I learned what not to do. That's a good thing. You know, God, kids should be reading. We give young people so little credit. So anyway, I could talk for 8 hours about that topic. I really could, and it gets me fired up. And the other thing that gets me fired up is that now the far right is using the terms pedophile and groomers for people writing this book. I think most people see me and know me as a very laid-back person. I am actually a fairly laid-back person. If you want to see me get fiery, this is how you do it. I am somebody who was groomed as a teenager. I was somebody who was a victim of a pedophile in my teenage years. To call me that when I have taken my life and devoted it to making sure things are safer for young people, I mean, they're doing a great job if they want to make me angry, but it does make me angry, and I will fight them to my last breath. What else? And sorry, I'll get off my soapbox. The book isn't, and it's funny, you'll read this book and you'll get more laughs than you're getting tonight, but I think it's important to have both. Anything else? Yes.
I want to go back to the chapter titles.
Yeah.
Is it the specific song title that relates to the chapter, or is it
Right.
the whole lyrics of the song?
It's mostly the song title, but it's a little bit. It was sort of like a parlor game. You know, I was just sort of, I had a list of songs that I thought might be interesting to use, and I started to play around. And sometimes I was using more than the song title, knowing what a song was about. There's a song called Digging Your Scene that actually plays a role in the book, because this was one of those moments as a young person that I felt like I might be going insane. This was a song by a group called the Blow Monkeys. It was a very popular song. It's a great song. It's a song about AIDS. It's a song about AIDS, and he has said that since then. Straight people at school used to walk down the hall singing this song. And these are the same people. This is a different time. This wasn't like straight people who are cool with gay things. These were straight people who used to call me that word that I used 8 million times in the first chapter. So there's this sort of co-opting of culture that was going on. And that's something that comes up. My characters spend a fair amount of time talking about things like that. What else? Anything else? Yes.
What do you hope readers, just any age, will take away from the book?
I think that it's a few different things. I think for younger readers, I hope that they take away some historical perspective. I had a student I taught at Arizona State last fall. I had a queer 18-year-old student, a boy who wore rainbow flags and had his toenails painted. And we read a scene that had to do with the AIDS epidemic. And in his reflection, he wrote to me, "It was interesting to read about AIDS. I don't know very much about it." And like my head was going to explode. I thought, how is that possible? But it is possible. It's also kind of interesting because I want to make sure we aren't talking about AIDS in the past tense. It's still happening. 5,000 to 7,000 Americans are dying every year. What's happened is that it has become a class issue in a lot of ways. People who have upper middle class and middle class people who have health insurance, have the means, aren't dying because there's a medicine, PrEP, that can keep people mostly from getting infected. But there are a lot of people who don't have access to that, and it's just as deadly as it ever was. And I think it's really important that we keep saying that so we don't act like idiots when people are dying. Anyway, God, I could talk about this issue. It's the biggest issue that's been in my life. There's nothing has been more important in my life than this. Yeah, go ahead.
We got one online question from
Yes.
Rachel. Rachel asks, have you created a playlist to go with the book?
If you go on my social media, it's pinned to the top of my Instagram and Facebook. I think those are the two. Maybe Twitter as well. There is a chapter by chapter playlist that I made. I haven't gone through and done what I'd like to do, which is take every song that's in the book, because some aren't chapter titles. And that would be about a 45 or 50 song playlist. And I will do that at some point. Yes.
I was going to say, there's a difference between the fact that CJ's parents are, his stepdad is kind of like chill. And so different, they have different dynamics.
Yeah.
CJ has one parent there, but Micah has both parents there.
Right.
But Micah can't be himself.
Yeah. Right.
So where does that come from?
So neither were my situation. I wanted to deal with, Micah had a little bit of what I was going through, which was I had liberal parents who were clearly not going to be okay with me being gay. And I wanted to explore that. And I think what I did with the character CJ is I gave him another emotional truth about me, which is that I was a neglected kid. And so CJ is a neglected kid. And so I'm exploring, in the book, he talks about his father being abducted by aliens and his mother dying on an oil rig. That's the kind of character CJ is. He talks in code. He tells lies. But that's all code for him to say, I don't have a mother. His mother in the book has passed. His father's not in the picture. And he's done the best he can. And that's exactly how I feel about my own experience. I was a kid who did not have parents who paid attention in the ways they probably should have. So that's something I was dealing with.
Which I find amazing because you're going to have readers that, you have readers of all ages, but the readers who are young adult age who live in those situations.
Yeah.
I think it's good to have that seen on the page.
I think that's right. And also, one of the nice things that can be taken from a book like this by people of all ages is that we are all connected and we're all exactly the same. I mean, not exactly, but we all share a ton of the same DNA. And there is nothing that is new in this world. So, for people who read, God bless you, you're going to continue to see things one is going to continue to see things that have popped up in their own life. And that's what I want. I want somebody who's going through that experience to go, oh, I feel seen. I have parents who are liberal but not going to be okay. Or I have, I'm neglected, and, no one's alone. We've all been, everybody has one of those stories. That's not exactly what I mean, but I think you know what I mean. I mean that people have those stories. What else? We have a little time. Oh yeah, we have a little more time. Anything else that I can say to you? Yeah.
You sort of alluded to something there with your last answer towards your issues of neglect and your relationship with your parents and everything. Do you? So obviously there was a little bit of this in this book, but just in your writing in general, do you find there's a lot of introspective self-awareness, self-examination that goes on in your writing? I
do. However, I would say the thing that makes this book a bit of a departure is I think that the self-evaluation goes deeper in this book in this way. I think that I have purposefully avoided characters who, like me, had a precocious childhood. I didn't want to write that. I didn't think it was necessarily appropriate. And I'm glad that I think it's appropriate now, because I'm not alone. There are a lot of people who feel this way. And I hope they find this book, because if we got to keep going through it. I think there are a lot of young people who are struggling, and it can be helpful for them to see somebody who got to the other side of it. And I am that person. I got to the other side of it. And they can too. And it just takes, I don't even know what it takes, perseverance, good sense of humor. I don't know, something. Yeah.
Another question. And this is in relation to age still being an issue today.
Yeah.
And it tends to be, I'm going to say more significant, if you can argue that point, more significant in racially in people of color.
Yeah.
Because it isn't talked about and the information isn't out there.
Right.
And I'm noticing we have a very small percentage of people of color here.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you do or Scholastic does or in promoting your work anywhere that you have an outreach to communities of color?
I think that's giving, I'm not putting down Scholastic, but I think that's giving publicity departments too much credit. People we're not reaching out to anybody.
Right.
I think that it's in some ways my job. It's in some ways readers' jobs and bloggers' jobs to talk about these things, to help books find the market that is needed. I am a cisgender white gay male, so I think my pull, is less than a reader who is a writer who is a BIPOC writer, Black, Indigenous, person of color, is going to be able to touch on certain issues more than I am. But I wrote from my perspective, and that's what I do. I think that that's really what I do. Yeah. What else do we have? Anything?
I just want to say, if you haven't read Bill's other books, you really need to, because they're all really, really amazing.
Yes.
That's all.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Let's say that again. No, thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, I will say this though, because I'm a college professor that teaches young adult literature. That's my thing. And Bill has come into my classroom. He's come to my conferences, and there's so many young adults that he's affected throughout the years that his books have made a difference in their life. So, I mean, that's just,
Thank you. Well, it was my hope to turn my bad situation into something that was better. I mean, I write books for younger people so that they have something that I didn't have. And I do see that happening. I see it happening all over. And that's something that I feel good about in my life. And of course, there are people who hate my books. You know, there's always going to be people who love them and hate them, and you know, I can't control that. You know, it's just, you know, people are people. Yes.
What are you reading currently? Or,
I just finished two things. I finished A.S. King's Attack of the Black Rectangles, which is a middle grade book about book banning. It's wonderful. And Amy is a friend of mine. And then I read something called The Unfolding, which is by A.M. Holmes, who is an adult literary author. That was a petrifying book, sort of like an alternative history book starting in 2008, which is about rich white men who want to take over the country. It gets a little bit close to where we really are. But it was like a kind of book. And I have another book that is on my table that I'm having trouble getting to. It's called When You Call My Name, and it's a book that takes place in 90, but the same topic in the same city. So I'm excited. Have you read that?
no, but I have it on my CDR card.
It's really good. Okay, yeah, I think it's going to be good, and I've been in touch with the author. I haven't read it yet, but I think I'd really like to get together a group of YA authors who have written about this subject from different points of view, different perspectives, go around and talk about it. I don't understand exactly how, as a society, this hasn't been a subject that we've just explored a little bit more. It seems like we've missed it, you know, and maybe we can go back and fix that a little bit, start talking about what's happening.
I was going to say possibly because no one wants to really deal with the fact that we neglected a huge portion of society in the 1980s. And if we actually, kind of like why we have these bans and they don't want to talk about stuff in schools because it makes us think, wait, we dropped the ball here.
Right. Isn't that sort of like everything that's going on with the book banning with like, you know, don't say gay and CRT. I mean, it's all the same. Don't show us places where we've missed where we haven't done well. And because of guilt. I mean, good God, is that a reason to not? Okay. But yeah, I think that's right. And I have personally found it very odd that things that have happened, you know, the way that gay issues change from the 1980s to the 2020s, it's as if it never happened. There was never a period of time where people said, hey, you know, we were wrong and we treated you poorly. And I think the same thing goes on in so many areas where it's just like a change happens and the attitude is like, well, we're accepting you now, so enjoy it. You know, which is, it's a strategy. Boy, you're catching me on a day when I just got a little rage right up at the top. It's okay. It's okay. Sometimes you're supposed to get angry, and anger is better than sadness, right? Like better to sometimes just feel angry.
And then you can take that anger and make it into books and shove in people's faces. There we go.
There you go.
Bill, I want to put a pitch in for the letter you wrote to the people who are going to ban this book.
Yeah.
It's on your, I don't know if it's on your Instagram page, but it's on your Facebook page.
It's on, the letter to the book banners is something I wrote back in February. I was pleased with that letter. It had the tone of it. It's funny, an article came out from the National Education Association today that they interviewed me about book banning. It was a funny interview because the woman said, you know, I read that article of yours and the tone was almost sort of kind. And I laughed because I was like, yeah, it was because I was feeling kind. And my feelings have changed. So I appreciate that. I think that there is something to be said for trying to find common ground and trying to say, look, I think you're doing the best you can do. I think you mean well, but here's why you're wrong. And I think the problem with it is now I don't actually think people are trying their best. I think that this is a coordinated attack by people who know far better what they're doing. So, you know, it's still worthy of a read. I think if you ever want to, if you're teaching a class in argumentation, it's not a bad text because that's a good way to argue. You hit all the points and you're rational about it. The other way is to just go like this, which is what I feel like doing now.
All right. I think we have reached the end of our event. I would like everyone to give Bill a round of applause. Thank you, Bill, so much for being
Thank
here.
you. Thanks so much. Thanks.
And thank you so much to everyone who is watching online. If you notice, there is going to be a link below that says Buy Destination Unknown. That'll take you to our website, and you can still get a signed copy because we will make sure to get some stock signing. Thank you so much. I hope everyone has a good night. Bye.